So before anyone knew any real information about the shooting in Georgia, Kamala Harris said this.
Before I begin, I do want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia. We're still gathering information about what happened, but we know that there were multiple fatalities and injuries. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all. You know, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. And for the young leaders who are here who are raising their hand, I'm telling you, every time the auditorium was packed and almost every hand went up. You know, a lot of us, I'll speak about myself, you know, we had, I grew up in California, earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but our kids are sitting in a classroom where they should be fulfilling their God-given potential, and some part of their big, beautiful brain is concerned about a shooter busting through the door of the classroom. It does not have to be this way. I'm telling you, we are witnessing a full-on attack on hard-fought, hard-won fundamental freedoms and rights, including the freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence. Let us finally pass an assault weapons ban and universal background checks and red flag laws. Because we are clear on that point, it is a false choice to say you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, and I know we need reasonable gun safety laws in our country.
Kamala, what are you talking about? When you were asked if you think we should have mandatory buybacks, you said this.
Mandatory buyback of quote-unquote assault weapons, and whether or not you do, how does that idea not go against fundamentally the Second Amendment?
Great question. I do believe that we need to do buyback. I'll tell you, when elected president, if the United States Congress continues to fail to have the courage to do something about this, I'm prepared to take executive action and put in place a ban on the importation of assault weapons into our country. But we still have to deal with the over 2 million assault weapons that are currently in the streets of America. And so a buyback program is a good idea.
Then when you were vice president, you insinuated that we should do what the Australians did.
Gun violence has terrorized and traumatized so many of our communities in this country. And let us be clear, it does not have to be this way, as our friends in Australia have demonstrated.
Anyone want to take a guess what the Australians did with the guns? Let me show you.
Just 12 days later, the then Prime Minister John Howard pushed through a sweeping set of gun regulations, despite a lack of support from his rural constituency.
I'm sorry about that, but there is no other way. There is no other way.
Within a month, the government passed the National Firearms Agreement, transforming gun legislation in the country.
The hardest things to do in politics often involve taking away rights and privileges from your own supporters.
The tough new laws banned the sale and importation of all automatic and semi-automatic rifles and shotguns, and perhaps most significantly, called for a massive mandatory gun buyback. Australia's government confiscated and destroyed nearly 700,000 firearms, reducing the number of gun-owning households by half.
People used to say to me, you've violated my human rights by taking away my gun. And I said, look, I understand that, but will you please understand the argument? The greatest human right of all is to live a safe life.
Kamala Harris is doing what politicians love to do, gaslighting the entire country. She's trying to sell the idea that you can be pro-Second Amendment while still wanting to restrict it. Sorry, but that's not how the Second Amendment works. The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. There were no exceptions. We've already compromised far more than we should have. But she's still pushing for more. Even when she was calling for mandatory buybacks, that wasn't enough, which is also just a fancy way of saying gun confiscation. They slap a nice label on it to make it sound less oppressive, but it's the same shit. At least the Australian Prime Minister had the guts to say it outright. Yeah, I'm taking your guns. No sugarcoating, no pretending. Kamala, on the other hand, smiles and says she's pro-Second Amendment and then turns around and pushes more restrictions. It's like saying I love free speech while banning half of the words in a dictionary. In Australia, they don't have the Second Amendment, so they could just take the guns without a second thought. Here in America, Kamala knows she can't just grab our guns without a fight, so she plays this manipulative game by gaslighting and convincing people to vote away their own rights. She doesn't care about the Second Amendment, she just wants control. And what makes it even worse, she didn't even have the decency to acknowledge that it was a good guy with a gun who stopped the shooter. Oh, that's right, she couldn't have. Why? Because instead of waiting for all the information, her eyes lit up at the chance to push gun control on the backs of this tragedy. If she'd waited and actually taken the time to get the facts, she could have used that moment to show how important it is to have a good guy with a gun in schools. But no, that wouldn't fit the narrative. Every time there's a tragedy, she jumps in to exploit it, pushing her own agenda before the facts are even out. She claims it's a false choice to say you're either for the Second Amendment or against gun control. But the reality is, she's literally said she wants to take guns away. I don't understand why we have to keep saying this over and over again, and then people keep gaslighting us, saying we're crazy that she doesn't want to take the guns, when she said it with her own mouth. She doesn't have to state it explicitly. It's logic. If you make it mandatory to give back your guns to the government, they are confiscating it, because if you don't do it, there will be consequences. That is not voluntary. That's mandatory, i.e. a confiscation. So no, stop telling us she's not trying to take our guns or no one's trying to take our guns. That's exactly what they're doing, especially when they're trying to take the most popular rifle in the country. If you say you support something while constantly trying to dismantle it, do you really support it? One thing's for certain and two things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you. And we're all fighting this culture war together. Now, you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together, we can stop the suppression of our two-way rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.